thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Today is Thursday. It is September 17th, 2020. Thanks so much for joining me. I want to begin with who I believe is the most significant and the greatest threat to American democracy. It is not Donald Trump. I believe Donald Trump is the second greatest threat to American democracy. But Attorney General William Barr, he is by far the single greatest threat to American democracy. I have several clips from CBS who did a recap of his speech last night. And in that speech, he did a range of things. He went from comparing the mask, people wearing masks during the pandemic and people being asked to lock down during the pandemic. He compared that to slavery. And that in and of itself may not make sense to you why I think that's so dangerous, but I will elaborate a little bit more. But he goes so much further in these clips. He goes all the way as far as saying that he believes that this Department of Justice is his, and that these agents are his. And that is a complete contrast to what every other administration attempts to do. Whether they actually do it, they at least attempt to make sure that the Department of Justice is there to carry out justice on behalf of the United States and not on behalf of any particular administration. So let's begin with the clip where he compares being locked down from the coronavirus to slavery. Listen in.
Putting a national lockdown, stay-at-home orders is like house. Putting a national lockdown, stay-at-home orders is like house arrest.
At a conservative Constitution Day event in Virginia last night, Attorney General Bill Barr said this of quarantining nationwide.
It's, other than slavery, which was a different kind of restraint, this is the greatest intrusion on civil liberties in American history.
Barr suggested that politicians, not medical professionals, should guide the public during the pandemic.
The person in the white coat is not the grand seer who can come up with the right decision for society. A free people makes its decision through its elected representative.
Okay, so that's just the first part. I'm going to build the entire case, but here's why this is so important. By him drawing an analog between wearing a mask, being locked down, and slavery, he is directly contributing to this movement across the country that seeks to equate the fight against coronavirus with our fight against police brutality. Now, that in and of itself isn't what makes him the most significant threat to democracy, but it does show you that Attorney General William Barr is willing to coddle the QAnon crowd, the anti-mask crowd. He's willing to play into their political derangement and their conspiracy theories. And so he's also willing to play with the lives of millions of Americans, because if we had successfully locked down for 2 weeks to a month and everybody wore a mask, we would be out of this by now. We are 7 months in. And so if we had successfully locked down and done what was necessary, then we could have saved so many lives. So, yes, he is a threat to democracy. But in that first statement, he is a threat to human life. And he's playing with fire because he's feeding into this political derangement that we are seeing from the QAnon and the anti-maskers. But he goes even further. Now he's getting ready to dismiss the entirety of Black Lives Matter as if we're simply just, trying to use Black lives as props. Listen in.
In the wide-ranging discussion, Barr also criticized the Black Lives Matter movement.
Proposition, who can quarrel with the proposition Black Lives Matter, but they're not interested in Black lives. They're interested in props. A small number of blacks who were killed by police during conflict with police, usually less than a dozen a year, who they can use as props to achieve a much broader political agenda.
But the data shows that 250 black people were killed by police last year alone. Black people are more than 3 times more likely to be killed during a police encounter than white people.
So there he is. He is sitting there as if he's a fair arbiter of justice, as the attorney general who is making sure that everyone has equal justice before the law, and dismisses the Black Lives Matter protest and movement as people with a political agenda, and then he tries to make an assertion that sounds like fact, that it's only like a dozen people who gets killed by blacks, right? Who get killed by the police every year, when that's not factual. Last year, 250 African Americans, black people, not blacks, Barr, were killed by the police, and we're 3 times more likely to be killed by police than white people. So there is a systemic problem. But there he is sitting as though this is not really a problem, and I'm a fair adjudicator of justice, and there's really only like a dozen people who are killed. So he's giving all of this information that is counterfactual, that is a lie, that is not the truth, but he's trying to assert it as if it is factual. He's trying to assert his misinformation as if it is the truth, not laced with a political agenda, when in fact he is inserting misinformation that is not true, that is wholly part of the political agenda of the conservative movement, which is to suggest that there is no such thing as systemic racism in this country. And in order for him to do that, he had to downplay the number of people who were killed by police officers, the number of black people who were killed by police officers, and use his own misinformation, his own propaganda, and sit there as if he's a fair adjudicator of justice when he is sitting in the seat of a political apparatchik who is executing his own political agenda. That's the thing. I'm saying a lot of words, and I'm hoping you're getting it. What he's doing is pretending as if we have an agenda and he doesn't, when he's giving misinformation and propaganda, a part of his agenda, against what we're simply trying to fight, which is actual proof of systemic racism. But it gets worse, because now he's going to show that he's not only willing to lie and spew propaganda and pretend as if he's a fair adjudicator of justice, he's getting ready to attack his own Department of Justice. Listen in.
Our prosecutors have all too often inserted themselves into the political process based on the flimsiest of legal theories.
Barr criticized his prosecutors for political headhunting and defended criticism that he ever interfered in cases involving close associates of the president, like Roger Stone and Michael Flynn.
Letting the most junior members set the agenda might be a good philosophy for a Montessori preschool, but it is no way to run a federal agency.
This is him showing that he's willing to not only undermine justice by supporting and getting involved in Donald Trump's, the different investigations involving Donald Trump, but he's trying to put his own career Department of Justice officials in check. He's trying to throw pressure on them. There's a difference between political appointees and people who are career members of the Department of Justice. And the difference is that political appointees generally do come in and set a general political agenda. The people who are career agents, people who are career attorneys, people who are there for the long haul, they stay between administrations. This is not necessarily good or bad, but there is a difference between what William Barr is, a political appointee, and the career attorneys that are part of the Department of Justice. And this is him trying to apply pressure on them because he has received pushback from his careerists, the people that are there, no matter what administration, trying to bring justice before the law. To greater or lesser extent, we can always pick apart the Department of Justice, clearly. But what William Barr is trying to do is apply political pressure to the people who are there across the different administrations. But this last clip is the one where he makes it clear that he views this department as his own agency.
And I'm saying, what do you mean by interfere? Under the law, all prosecutorial power is vested in the Attorney General. And these people are agents of the Attorney General. And as I say to FBI agents, whose agent do you think you are? Now, I don't say this in a pompous way, but that is the chain of authority and legitimacy in the Department of Justice.
And there you have it. He's saying that these are his agents. No, Attorney General, these are agents of the United States, not of any single political appointee. They have a role to play. And because in previous administrations, there has attempted to be again, I want to put emphasis on the attempt to draw a distinction between the type of appointee that takes over the Department of Justice and, let's say, the type of employee who takes over the Housing and Urban Development or whatever other department. The Department of Justice is unique in that it is a function of the government that goes beyond the administration. It is there to be a fair adjudicator of justice above the administration. And what William Barr has just stated in that last clip is that not only does he put the Trump administration above the Department of Justice, he puts his own political position above the Department of Justice beyond just the hierarchical purposes, but far reaching down into the different aspects and the functions of that department. And this is something that every other administration at least attempted to avoid. And with Donald Trump, there is no attempt. And this is how we get to the point where William Barr is now representing the president of the United States in his personal civil lawsuit. In his personal civil lawsuit for defamation with a woman that that accused him of sexual assault, the Department of Justice, William Barr, is defending the president of the United States. It gets even worse when you consider everything else that is happening in this country. I want to pull up a headline on your screen from the New York Times. Barr told prosecutors to consider sedition charges for protest violence. Attorney General William P. Barr was also said to have asked prosecutors to explore whether to bring charges against the mayor of Seattle for allowing a police-free protest zone. And here's a quote from the New York Times, and I want you to listen to this closely. Attorney General William P. Barr told federal prosecutors in a call last week that they should be considering charging rioters and others who had committed violent crimes. And this sentence, I want to pause there. That sentence is tricky. Charging rioters and others who committed violent crimes. Rioters is something that they have been generally able to label everybody that is out there with. And then they put the addendum, who committed violent crimes and others who committed violent crimes. So this is a catch-all phrase that's going to go after every protester, not just people who actually committed violent crimes. But let me continue. Charging rioters and others who committed violent crimes at protests in recent months with sedition, according to two people familiar with the call. The highly unusual suggestion to charge people with insurrection against lawful authority alarmed some on the call, which included U.S. attorneys around the country, said the people who described Mr. Barr's comments on the condition of anonymity for fear of retribution. So people a part of his department are afraid of this man. They fear that he's going to get some type of retribution against them for speaking out about justice in this critical moment where he is attempting to use the Department of Justice to not maintain law and order, but to punish people with whom he politically disagrees, to punish protests, to punish dissent. And it is a particular dissent that he's trying to punish. He's not gonna punish the white militias that are running around this country killing people. He's not going to punish them. He's not going to charge them with sedition. He's going to charge Black Lives Matter protesters with sedition, insurrection, because in his mind, the very fact that we are out there protesting against this police state is insurrection, and that we should be charged not with destroying property, which we could argue about all day long. It's not about being charged with breaking windows or burning down a car or burning down a building. It's with insurrection. It's to say that we are treasonous, that those of us who oppose the police brutality in this country, we are treasonous and we're committing acts of sedition. There's so much more in this, but I want to play one last clip because it really kind of shows you, it puts a fine point on all of this, or actually two more clips. I want to play this clip from President Trump as he responds to the idea of sedition being charged against protesters. And then I want to play a clip of Donald Trump's chief of staff who comes to defend William Barr.
Bill Barr told prosecutors that he wants to charge violent demonstrators with sedition. And you told Judge Janine that if there's violent demonstrations on election night, we'll put them down very quickly if they do that. Look, it's called an insurrection. So I'm wondering why you want to use that kind of rhetoric when there's such a
Well, the question was asked to me about if you have violent demonstrations. Yes, we will put it down very, very quickly if there is. Absolutely.
Are you making
And I think the American public wants to see that. Yeah, OAN, please. OAN, yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. With
No,
regards
just to finish, look, if there's any kind of demonstration or violence, there will be nothing that interferes with this product, this vote. There's going to be nothing.
And so now this ties into the election, right? It goes far beyond just Black Lives Matter, but it's the fact that Donald Trump and William Barr, they see both Black Lives Matter protesters as the same as people who would come out and vote on election day. There's a deeply rooted political agenda here, and William Barr is giving Donald Trump the cover that he needs because William Barr is protecting the president from any type of meaningful prosecution from the Department of Justice. He interfered with the Mueller investigation. He interfered with Roger Stone. He interfered with Michael Flynn. And it is so bad that Attorney General William Barr is so egregious in this, in that he actually makes Jeff Sessions, who was Donald Trump's first attorney general, makes him actually look noble because Jeff Sessions actually recused himself. And you can remember that's why Donald Trump got rid of Jeff Sessions, because Jeff Sessions recused himself from that special investigation into the Mueller investigation. And so Donald Trump got rid of him, brought in William Barr, who's not only willing to get involved with the Mueller investigation, but was willing to get involved with the Michael Flynn investigation, willing to get involved with the Roger Stone investigation, and also is willing to go as far as Donald Trump wants him to go to secure power for another term. This man is the most dangerous man in America. Mark Meadows, the chief of staff, he was on Fox and Friends this morning. Listen to what he said.
Well, when we talk about setting priorities, Bill Barr is exactly right. We need to make sure that everyone is treated equally under the law. But unfortunately, some would say it's the deep state. I would just say that it's actually the swamp that continues to try to make sure a political agenda is driven instead of law and order and justice for all. But I can also say we don't have to look any further than the Mueller investigation, where we spent tens of millions of dollars and wasted unbelievable time to come out with a report to conclude what we already knew, that there was no collusion. So it's time that we get back. We restore the integrity to the Department of Justice and the FBI. I think we're well on our way because we've got leaders who are willing to hold people accountable. But it's what we all hate about our federal government is when they play politics.
Look at what they're playing with here.
Mark Meadows.
They're playing with the idea of the deep state, which plays right into the very first thing that William Barr was talking about, which was this lockdown being more egregious than slavery or being second to slavery. And the idea of the deep state tying into all of the political derangement of QAnon. He just throws that out there. They are coddling that Nazi movement, as well as undermining the legitimacy of the upcoming election, as well as undermining our democracy by giving Donald Trump cover at every single turn. This is not how a Department of Justice has acted in previous administrations, with some exceptions, obviously. But we have gone so far past the Rubicon where now it is not unreasonable to think that William Barr will actively play a role in securing a second term for Donald Trump above and beyond the will of the people on November 3rd, and above and beyond any crimes that Donald Trump commits. There's nothing that Donald Trump will do that would lead to Attorney General William Barr actually doing and facilitating his job as the Attorney General. Because even though the President of the United States appoints the Attorney General does not serve as the counsel for the president. He serves as the chief counsel for the government, for the United States government and the American people. And this is so twisted and turned around where now we literally have William Barr serving as the private attorney for Donald Trump against the will of the people. And this is why he is the most dangerous to American democracy. Okay, let's talk about Julian Assange and the extradition trial that is taking place in London right now. They are attempting to extradite him to the United States to face possibly 175 years in prison for espionage and hacking. Now, the hacking portion of the charges are new. It's a part of the last 18 charges that have been brought before Julian Assange. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with Julian Assange, he is the founder of Wikileaks. Wikileaks is the organization that received the leaked information from Chelsea Manning that exposed the United States' egregious war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan. In this particular, and this is actually the best way to understand why this trial is important. And I have to add, despite my personal feelings about Julian Assange, right? I am not a fan of Julian Assange. And I put that there because I'll show you why later on in the segment. But despite not having an affinity for Julian Assange, what's happening is the U.S. government is trying to break down the wall between a journalist and a leaker, a whistleblower, an informant, their sources. Now, this is the perfect case because we saw with Chelsea Manning. Chelsea Manning leaked the information to Wikileaks, and she ultimately went to prison for that and served a very difficult time in prison. And it wasn't until President Obama, at the very last year of his presidency, did he commute the remainder of Chelsea's sentence, setting her free. But then when Chelsea did not want to testify against WikiLeaks, the Trump administration put Chelsea back in prison for another year. She was subsequently released because of the trauma that she was going through, and she attempted suicide. But I just want to put it in context because what's happening in London right now is that the United States is trying to successfully argue that there really is no barrier between journalists and our First Amendment right and the leaker. In this case, the whistleblower was Chelsea Manning. She was caught. She faced trial. She went to jail. She did her time and she had her sentence commuted. She was done. That should be the end of the story, but that's not enough for the American government. The American government wants to send a chilling effect to all journalists across the world, no matter where you are. If you publish information that is leaked to you, they want you to go to prison as a journalist, as a publication, for leaking that information, which is clearly a violation of our First Amendment Constitution rights, which is why they added these last 18 charges, which included espionage and hacking. So listen to this clip. This is a clip from Democracy Now! They interviewed Jennifer Robinson, who is his legal counsel there in the UK, in London, and she explains exactly what's going on in this trial. Listen in.
I think is the Department of Justice attempt to try and shift the case away from the Manning disclosures and, of course, the evidence that we've heard this week and seen in the publications around the world, evidence of war crimes, human rights abuse, corruption the world over. It is a clear press freedom case, and the attempts by the Department of Justice to somehow create this as a hacking case when there is absolutely no evidence of any hacking by Mr. Assange, I think demonstrates their desire to move away from the important issues on press freedom. We've heard already in the evidence this case, in the evidence this week from Clive Stafford Smith, the founder of Reprieve, about the importance of WikiLeaks disclosures about US extraordinary rendition, torture, and importantly, drone strikes and extrajudicial killings in Pakistan, and how those disclosures have been essential in his work, both in terms of holding the US government accountable for those actions in Pakistan, but also with respect to his Guantanamo litigation in the United States. We've also heard evidence from Professor Mark Feldstein about the unprecedented nature of the attack on First Amendment that this case represents, and the history of the Espionage Act being threatened against journalists by various presidents, including Roosevelt and Nixon, and now, in this case, by President Trump himself.
And this is why the case is so important, because it is clearly an attempt to shackle journalists and make them afraid of being able to report on information that they receive, however they receive that information. That's the goal of the government. That's the goal of the Trump administration. That's the goal of previous administrations, to be sure. And before I actually, let me finish, because I was getting ready to give you some things about WikiLeaks that makes me a little frustrated with WikiLeaks. I'm going to save that because I want to make sure that we establish the case that's against the frivolous case that's against Julian Assange, and how it is an attack on journalism in general, and how he is being used as a proxy for all journalists who would challenge the American government. This is a second clip from Jennifer Robinson as she makes it clear that this is exactly what's happening.
Well, Professor Feldstein explained at some length the importance of the First Amendment and how it protects every American citizen and any person within the US jurisdiction, their ability to, their free speech. And of course, it protects the media's ability to communicate with sources, receive information and publish it in the public interest. What he pointed out about the danger of this particular case is the breakdown of the distinction between sources and journalists. So we've often seen that sources who make unlawful or unauthorized disclosures are prosecuted and can face criminal prosecution as a result of their disclosures. But historically, that has never been directed at the media. The First Amendment is understood to protect the media in receiving and publishing that information in the public interest, which is exactly what WikiLeaks did. And in this case, what the Trump administration is alleging is that Julian Assange, by virtue of having communications with Chelsea Manning, receiving information from Chelsea Manning and publishing that information, is somehow conspiring and is conspiring in the underlying criminal act. And we've seen this same prosecution strategy now rolled out in Brazil by President Bolsonaro against Glenn Greenwald. That's why this is so dangerous, because this is the kind of activity that journalists engage in all day, every day across the United States and elsewhere around the world, which is why the New York Times and the Washington Post have both, in their editorials, said that this is criminalizing public interest journalism and news gathering practices that have been used for decades.
And this is why, regardless of how anyone feels about Julian Assange, right, as an individual, right, we have to forget about whatever we think about his personal politics, whatever we think about what we think about his political agenda. That's besides the point. We have to set that aside. And I'm not going to lie, it's difficult, and I'll show you why afterwards. But this is important. It is extremely important because he is being used as a proxy for all investigative journalists across the entire globe. Right, because his crimes he didn't commit his crimes in the United States. That's why he is going through an extradition trial right now. So it's journalism across the entire globe. As far as the actual crime, in so much as whistleblowing is a crime, Chelsea Manning served her time and her sentence was commuted by Barack Obama. But that wasn't enough. Because they want to make sure, they being the government, wants to make sure that they send a signal to every single investigative journalist publication across the globe that if you publish information that hurts the American government, that exposes its crimes, its war crimes, that they will try you and sentence you to 175 years in prison. This is the clearest assault on free speech that we have seen in a very long time. We're going to take a quick break, and when I come back, this is going to be a long episode, folks. We dug in deep, so we're going to go even longer. It'll probably be a full hour public episode, and we'll just let it be like that. But we'll be back right after this break.
Welcome back to The Benjamin Dixon Show. Visit us online at thebenjamindixonshow.com.
Welcome back, everybody. It has been a kind of precarious road with regard to Julian Assange. I probably will explain in even greater detail of why I have a problem with him in the Patrons episode, because it's kind of esoteric. It's kind of philosophical, and it's not really applicable to the urgency of the trial that's being levied against him. So I just want to put it in a proper context. What is appropriate for me to share here is what I think is a problem in leftist kind of libertarian sort of quasi, circles that had a belief around 2016 that Donald Trump was going to shake up this system. And people believe that so much so that WikiLeaks and Julian Assange believe that. And when it came out in 2016, I think it was 2016, 2017, that WikiLeaks had been coordinating with Donald Trump through Donald Trump Jr., it really pissed me off, especially because of the nature of the communications, which that showed, and I'm going to show you the communications, right? That showed that WikiLeaks was not a fair arbiter. They were not just doing journalism, which is cool because I don't just do journalism. I do a lot of commentary. I've picked sides, but so did WikiLeaks. The thing is that WikiLeaks tried to present itself as if it was on no one's side, but on the side of the truth. And when that came out, that's when I was like, above and beyond the esoteric kind of philosophical things that are irrelevant to this conversation that I will discuss in the Patrons episode, when it came out that they were actually actively trying to work with the Trump campaign, but give the world the appearance that they were nonpartisan or unbiased, that's when I threw my hands up with Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, and I was like, I don't care, whatever. But I'm having to swallow that so that we can cover the seriousness of the trial. I want to put it into context. I want everybody to understand where I'm coming from so that you could take what I say with a grain of salt, or maybe it clarifies that I am trying myself to be a fair arbiter in this conversation. All of that said, I want to pull up some images on your screen. The first one is a tweet from Don Jr. And in this tweet, Don Jr., being the idiot that he is, he released 4 images of conversations that he had with WikiLeaks. And he said, quote, "Here's the entire chain of messages with WikiLeaks with my whopping 3 responses, which one of the congressional committees has chosen to selectively leak. How ironic." I don't know what he thought was ironic of it. But here are the images that he released himself. And this is a conversation between Don Jr., WikiLeaks, whose founder, Julian Assange, is now on trial by the Trump administration. And actually, before I even read this, I want you to, that's the point. The point is that a lot of people bought into the idea that Donald Trump was somehow going to be a liberator of the free press, and to the extent that WikiLeaks and Julian Assange actually tried to appeal to him. And who is going above and beyond to make sure that this man faces trial? Donald Trump. So these are the messages between WikiLeaks and Don Jr. The first one reads, "A PAC-run anti-Trump site, PutinTrump.org, is about to launch. The PAC is a recycled pro-Iraq war PAC. We have guessed the password. It is Putin Trump," which is pretty dumb for them to have that as the password, by the way. It is see about for who is behind it. Any comments? He said, "Off the record, I don't know who that is, but I'll ask around." That is Don Jr. Then the next exchange came about a month later, and this is from WikiLeaks writing to Don Jr. on Twitter in their private DMs. He said they shared an article about Hillary Clinton and Julian Assange. He said, "Hi, this is WikiLeaks speaking. Hi, it'd be great if you guys," talking about the Trump administration, "could comment on this article or push the story." Okay, low-hanging fruit, but I just want to give you all of it in context. You can make your decision for yourself. And this is what Don Jr. replied. He said, "I already did that earlier today. It's amazing what she," talking about Hillary Clinton, "can get away with. This is Don Jr., Donald Trump's son, speaking. He said, what's behind, this is about a few later on that day. He said, what's behind this Wednesday leak I keep hearing about? Now, to WikiLeaks' credit, they did not respond to him immediately. They responded a couple of days later with something totally different. But here's where it gets interesting. They said, hey, Donald, great to see you and your dad talking about our publication. Strongly suggest that your dad tweets this link if he mentions us. And he gives the Twitter, the WikiLeaks link. He said, you guys can get all of your followers digging through the content. There's many great stories in there. The press are missing, and we are sure to find some of your followers will find it. Let's go a little bit further. I don't have to give you all of this, and it's a little bit in the weeds, but I want you to see the kind of relationship that WikiLeaks was trying to develop with Donald Trump, because of a lot of people in 2016 pushed Donald Trump because they believed that he was going to be different and that he was going to help in terms of draining the swamp and help Julian Assange, who was they were trying to extradite him back then. And because they believed Donald Trump was going to help him, they started kind of, buttering Don Jr. up. Here's the fourth image. He said, this is WikiLeaks saying, by the way, we just released Podesta emails part 4. And they kept talking to him. Don Jr. didn't reply. This is them on October 21st, 2016. They said, hey, Don Jr., we have an unusual idea. Leak us one or more of your father's tax returns. The benefits are this. Number 1, most of the harm has already been done by the New York Times and preempted by your father, tax write-downs. Number 2, it's possible that any moment they could come through the most biased source, New York Times, MSNBC, who will distort them into the worst possible light. Number 3, and this is the kicker, their exact words. If we, WikiLeaks, publish them, it will dramatically improve the perception of our impartiality. This is the real kicker. That means the vast amount of stuff that we are publishing about Clinton will have much higher impact because it won't be perceived as coming from a, quote, pro-Trump, quote, pro-Russian source, which the Clinton campaign is consistently slandering us with. And then they gave their information. That's the entire exchange. That last one, I really could have just started this entire conversation with the last one, because that very last one shows you the disposition that WikiLeaks and their founder, Julian Assange, had towards the Trump administration in actively trying to help him win while telling the world and trying to maintain the perception that they were just some unbiased truth tellers. Now, the trial that's going on is far more important than this. But this is important because if people are still fooled into thinking that Donald Trump is somehow not a part of the deep state that he says that he's trying to fight, this is your evidence. Because Donald Trump is the person, his administration, Attorney General William Barr is the head of the DOJ. Trump's Attorney General could drop these charges right now if he wanted to. Hell, they got Michael Flynn off the hook. They got Roger Stone off the hook. You mean to tell me they can't get Julian Assange off the hook? But they don't want to do it. And the reason they don't want to do it is because they are a part of the same consensus that goes across every administration that puts pressure on journalists as well as whistleblowers. And so the idea that they had in their head that they could get some kind of special help from Donald Trump, it was so erroneous and so sad and so tragic in that it literally undermined their validity in the eyes of so many people far beyond me. Let's do this Patreon party.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and get twice the content and unfiltered interviews without any of the commercial interruptions.
And here we go. At this point in every single episode, I'd like to take a minute to thank the people who make this show possible, our patrons. Very special welcome to Anna Fox. Thank you for becoming a patron. 88J J Brainerd. All right. Thank you for becoming a patron. Brianna Henderson. Thank you for becoming a patron. Kara Houlihan. Thank you for becoming a patron. Wait a minute. Christopher Ware, thank you for becoming a patron. And Veronica Gonzalez, thank you so much for becoming a patron. You too can become a part of this prestigious and prodigious patron family by going to patreon.com/the BPD show, where you get twice the content, uncut, unfiltered, uninterrupted interviews, and you give me the ability to speak truth to power, but more importantly, power into the powerless, whether the powerful like it or not. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Yep.
Visit us online at thebenjamindixonshow.com.
Here we go. All right. Again, this episode is going to be extra long. I am still going to do a patrons portion, so you can go to patreon.com/the BPD show, and I will discuss the other problems that I have with Julian Assange. I don't view him as a hero at all, like so many people in my circles do. And I know by saying that I don't view him as a hero at all is going to cost me followers and probably some patrons. I do view his case as important enough to not be concerned about how I personally feel about him, because it has implications far-reaching well beyond him, right? Julian Assange will be dead and gone in 50 years, but the precedent has been set. If the United States is successful in extraditing him and charging him and finding him guilty, they would have set the precedent that gives men like Attorney General William Barr, Donald Trump's Attorney General, gives him the ability to prosecute journalists who exercise their essentially, it cracks down on the First Amendment. Patreon.com/the BPD show. I'll discuss it more there. I want to shift gears to talk about actually, let me skip down. I want to talk about what's at stake in this election. Dan Coates, who was Donald Trump's former director of national intelligence, he penned an op-ed in the New York Times entitled "What's at Stake in This Election? The American Democratic Experiment." The American Democratic Experiment is at stake in this election. And he said, Congress should establish a bipartisan commission to monitor voting and ensure that laws and regulations are followed. And I want to read a couple of lines from what he wrote. Actually, quite a few lines, but I think it is important enough for us to discuss it at great length. Here's what he said. Quote, "Our democracy's enemies, foreign and domestic, want us to concede in advance that our voting systems are faulty or fraudulent, that sinister conspiracies have distorted the political will of the people, that our public discourse has been perverted by the news media and social networks riddled with prejudice, lies, and ill will, that judicial institutions, law enforcement, and even national security have been twisted, misused, and misdirected to create anxiety and conflict, not justice and social peace." He went on to say, "If those are the results of this tumultuous election year, we are lost, no matter which candidate wins. No American, and certainly no American leader, should want such an outcome. Total destruction and sowing salt in the earth of American democracy is a catastrophe well beyond simple defeat and a poison for generations. An electoral victory on these terms would be no victory at all. The judgment of history reflecting on the death of enlightened democracy would be harsh." I know that's a lie, and I actually have another quote from him that I would like to read to you. But I want to stop there because here's why all of this is important. I've been personally feeling the nudging of the end of our democracy. I feel like it's just been at the doorsteps. And I feel like we're at a crucial juncture where the election in 2020 will be the determining factor whether or not America actually survives. Now, a lot of people dismiss that because they think that what we have, we will always have. They think that the stability that we have, we will always have. They think that America is too big to fail. I think America is too big for us to let it fail, but others feel like it's just inevitable that America would always be here. But there's something different about this election. And that thing that is different is not only Donald Trump's blatant attempt to undermine the election, but it's the willingness of his co-conspirators to play their role. It is the willingness of Attorney General William Barr to bend and break the Constitution in favor of Donald Trump. It is the willingness of all of his supporters who are willing to go as far as into civil war. They are actively preparing for a second civil war. All of these people are playing their role, and they are setting the standard so absurd that they have sowed into the minds of half of this country, half of the people who are going to vote in this election. Donald Trump has successfully woven into their thinking that the only way he can lose is if Democrats cheat, if Joe Biden cheats. Now, you take all of these components, you put his followers who are ready, and they've been ready to go into a second civil war since the first civil war, quite frankly, but most certainly since the election in 2016. You take the fact that they have been patrolling the country. They have been going from state to state with their armed militias. They have killed people, and they have shown that they are in league with our policing agencies. You add that with a political party in the Republican Party that is willing to do whatever Donald Trump says. You add on top of that conservative justices all across the country that Donald Trump has appointed. You add on top of that the Department of Justice being headed up by a man who views his job to be to serve the president personally and not the American people. And finally, you add on top of that a president who has no regard for anything else but his own ego. And you do have the elements of the demise of this democracy. And I am tired. We've already lived through one. We're living in the middle of one historical moment. 2020 is bad enough with the coronavirus. Can we not add a civil war, a second civil war on top of it? Let me read a little bit more from Dan Coates. He said, quote, "The most important part of an effective response is to finally, at long last, forge a genuinely bipartisan effort to save our democracy, rejecting the vicious partisanship that has disabled and destabilized government for too long. If we cannot find common ground now on this core issue at the very heart of our endangered system, we never will. Our key goal should be reassurance. We must firmly, unambiguously reassure all Americans that their vote will be counted, that it will matter, that the people's will expressed through their votes will not be questioned, and it will be respected and accepted. I propose that Congress creates a new mechanism to help accomplish this purpose. It should create a supremely high-level bipartisan and nonpartisan commission to oversee the election." This is critical. And listen, I clearly will have a litany of things about Dan Coates, both past and present, that we can use to attack him. But why? Because the sentiment of this article cuts to the core of what we are facing right now. We are literally facing a moment in American history where we can continue with this experiment in democracy, or we can see it all burn down. And I say this, I actually want to say something else here, and I'll expound on it more in the patrons episode. You guys are good. The patrons get an hour and a half today. It's like, wow. I know a lot of people fancy the idea of America. Not a lot of people. I know some people fancy the idea of America crumbling because of all of its past crimes, because of its war crimes, because of its genocide, because of all the things it has done wrong throughout American history. I don't fancy that notion. I don't look forward to the demise of America because of what it means. Look at Syria. Look at how in Syria you can go from 1 year celebrating a birthday in a normal, stabilized, Like whatever you define normal, whether you define it as a dictatorship or what, but there was stability to the point where now Syrian refugees are dispersed across the globe. So many died trying to leave Syria. So many died in Syria. Their cities have been leveled to the ground. When we talk about undermining American democracy, we're not talking about anything short of that, where we would have to become refugees seeking asylum in other countries, where our cities could be leveled, where a dictatorial regime would enact punitive actions with our military inside of our borders. It's not hyperbole to say that we are on the cusp of going in that direction because of how our politics have been inflamed and because of how Donald Trump in particular. I don't care how many problems we have yet to fix. I don't care how many problems of racism and white supremacy and income inequality and work. I don't care how many things we have yet to fix. Believing that Donald Trump is going to somehow undermine America and from those ashes of the former America, something better can emerge is absolutely effing ridiculous. Because the ashes of America include your ashes, my ashes, the ashes of our family, the ashes of our children, the ashes of all of our dreams. And most importantly, possibly, the ashes of all of our aspirations to make this a better society for marginalized people. It will include the ashes of the marginalized, the people that we purport to fight on behalf of. It would include the ashes of the homeless. It would include the ashes of the LGBTQ community, the trans community. It would include the ashes of every single person, every single family and their dreams. And so for anyone who gets this giddy sensation with the idea of maybe it's best that America is destroyed, you're out of your fucking mind. And we don't have time for that. And so I will not sit back in this election and watch as Donald Trump actively undermines our country to the point where we will have nothing but rubble and ashes. Here's the other thing. I got the sneaky suspicion that people who like to revel in that idea as if it is a good idea that, hey, America's been so bad that let's just burn it down. Y'all will be some of the first motherfuckers to get out of the country and try to go seek asylum. While people like me who are like, hey, let's not go there. Let's try to work through this system. The other side of me is I'll be right here fighting this motherfucker to the end. While all of these people who are like to tweet and joke about, Donald Trump, let them burn it down, let America burn down. You guys will be gone with the first shipment of refugees out of this country. So I don't really have time or stomach for people who don't take the seriousness of this moment. Or they see the seriousness of this moment and they dismiss it because they're like, fuck America. But there's a difference between fuck America and goddamn America. Yes, goddamn America, because there's so many things that are broken and that we have to fix. But we don't fix it by going through obliterating this country, falling into another civil war. And I don't know how people can look at this moment and not see that that's what we're on the edge of. We are on the edge of that because we have a madman in the White House who does not care if he destroys this country. He only cares about his ego. Do you understand? That's all he cares about. And if he has to destroy this country in order to satiate his own megalomania, he will do it. And they are actively preparing to do it. And so if that means we got to work with people that we politically disagree with in the highest order to stabilize this country at a moment where we are failing, we are on life support and we are fading away. We have to stabilize the country in order to make progress from here. We cannot make progress from the ashes, because what will we be leaving our children and our grandchildren? The same exact thing that is being left to the children and the grandchildren of Syria, of every other nation that the United States has actively participated in undermining. I get it. Yes. Goddamn America. But we don't fix our problems, and we don't fix the problems of marginalized communities by obliterating this country. And I honestly believe that that is what we are on the verge of. And I honestly cannot stand the people who are sitting by getting a little kick of joy out of it because they think, well, let's just burn it all down. Honestly, because I think you guys will be the first ones to leave. And here I'll be fighting. It's always the people who talk the most cash money shit that don't really be about that life. And I'm trying to tell y'all, we need to seize this moment to preserve this little pitiful, pathetic attempt at a democracy so that we can fix it without having to go through the ashes.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.